Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dave Roth. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at AvaSure. With me today are Toby Eadelman as well as Wendy Pompa-Breen. And we are covering a session called Top Lessons Learned from Implementing 1,000 Virtual Monitoring Programs. So we're kind of giving you, this is a first-time webinar that we're running, a behind-the-scenes look at AvaSure as we went from a security company to become the leaders in virtual sitting and now pioneering virtual nursing. So as the subtitle says there, we're going to share our insights with you as you think through your virtual strategies and how we all can work together and things that you'd want to do yourselves. And so I'll talk to the agenda in just a second. Before we flip the slide, I do want to just cover some housekeeping. We want to make this as conversational as possible. So please look at your GoToWebinar setup, and under your questions, please put your questions in there. If they're quick questions, we might answer them offline. If they're questions that we can use here in the discussion, we'll actually pause and we'll talk to those questions. There's also a chat. Feel free to use that. Again, our goal here is to make this as two-way interactive as possible. The other thing to notice, we'll ask 2 polling questions along the way, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. These are basically yes/no questions, just so we can kind of gauge where you're at in your virtual care strategy. That helps us, that helps you as a peer group understand where we're all at. And for those not familiar with AvaSure, we are, as I mentioned before, with over 1,000 hospitals on our virtual telesitter and virtual nursing programs, as well as pilots and innovation partners. We're the leader in this space. And so we're the leader according to class research when it comes to being the #1 in reducing the cost of care. We've have over 150 evidence-based, these are case study results that our customers have achieved and published themselves. We're very proud of that. Most recently, we have accounts that have achieved 25% fall reduction while reducing sitting time by as much as 90%, or with Trinity Health achieving a $23 million worth of savings by centralizing their patient safety program. So very proud of these things and happy to share what is most suited for all of you. But without any further ado, next slide, please. And so here's today's agenda. Again, thank you for your time. We're going to cover, first of all, AvaSure's history, how we started as a security camera company to become today's leading virtual solution. Then next, talk about lessons learned along the way, how we transitioned to between the devices, the audio, all the challenges, and uncovering things that were harder than we originally thought that we hope will serve you as being informative. Should you do it yourself? Talking more about the hardware, software, but the part that really requires the people in the process, and then what we found as our keys to success in terms of providing the right solution for each of our customers to achieve the success that they have earned. So I'm going to turn it over. We're gonna hit the first topic, and I'm not sure, probably Toby, makes sense for us to go to the next slide, please. And Toby, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then hand it off to Wendy at the appropriate time.
All right, great. So I'm Toby Eadelman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at AvaSure. I've been with AvaSure for 10 years, and before that, I was actually a consultant that worked for the business for the first 5 years, from 2008 to 2013. And so I've been with AvaSure since the very beginning. And so I'm kind of excited to be able to share a little bit about our history today and how we got to where we are. So Wendy, do you want to introduce yourself and then I'll dive in?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Pompa-Breen. I am the manager of clinical implementation services. I have been a nurse for 25 years, but the last 6 I have been here at AvaSure.
Great. So digging in, as David mentioned, we have an interesting start in that we began years and years ago as a security company. Back then, we were into security cameras and badge access systems. And it was actually through that we originally learned of the falls issue in hospitals. As we were providing security systems for hospitals, it became apparent that this was an opportunity that we could address. And so in communications with some of the local hospitals here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, we learned of an opportunity and the challenges that the hospitals are facing around patient safety, specifically related to falls, which is where we got our beginning. Now, as we all know, we've expanded much beyond falls, and we do many different adverse events that we're able to help and assist with, and even most recent things, getting into virtual nursing as well. But as I talk about our history, I'm going to mainly focus on falls and how we got our start. So in the early days, what we did was we tried to use just purely off-the-shelf components, because of being the type of security company we were, was one who would install the equipment. We did not design our own. And so the initial implementation of this at the first hospital that we did back in 2008, it was purely a security camera. And we installed the security camera thinking, all right, great, now we can see into the rooms, and we can make it so that we don't need sitters into the room. And very quickly it became obvious that now we could see the patients, but we couldn't stop them. We couldn't assist them. We couldn't communicate with them. And so we then had to come up with a way to provide audio, since, as we all know, cameras are a video source. They are not an audio source. At that point, we had to come up with some off-the-shelf components to be able to provide audio for the room. So we needed to find a microphone, we needed to find a speaker, we had to find all of the electronics to be able to drive those. And so after a lot of searching, we did come up with some components that worked. They weren't perfect for the medical environment, because the patient room is actually a very difficult audio environment. And so there are a lot of challenges about being able to be heard in the room through the speakers, as well as to pick up audio in the room. But we came up with a solution for that. And so we had a camera installed in the ceiling, and we had a microphone and a speaker installed in the ceiling. And it kind of looked like, just one of those old school systems with a speaker and the base plate up there. And so now we could communicate into the room. And then we hit our next challenge. And our next challenge was really around the fact that we could now see the patient all the time, and we could hear them all the time. And we were using essentially security monitoring software to be able to communicate into the room. And although it wasn't perfect, we were able to pull it off. But we had the problem that, what do we do about preserving patient dignity in the situation when there was a caregiver in the room and they needed to be able to do something such as a bath or something like that? And so we had the issue of, how do we preserve patient privacy? So at this point, we had to start modifying things. And so we started to modify the software to be able to provide a privacy mask, so that the observer, when the caregiver requested it, would be able to block the privacy, or block the view and provide privacy. And so we were able to do that, but then we realized the patient at the other end really didn't know if they were being monitored, or if nobody could see, and the caregivers didn't know either. So we had to come up with another solution. And so at this point, we needed some kind of a light in the room, which is where the privacy light was born. And so we call it our privacy light, but it's actually the opposite. It's the we're watching you and keeping you safe light. And when it's off, it's when you have privacy. And so to be able to do that, we had to come up with some way, using the camera and the speaker and the microphone in the room, to somehow drive a light in the room as well. And so we were pretty creative, and we came up with a way to drive it by writing custom software that would now reside on the camera itself. And so we were able to drive that privacy light in the room. And so all of these things together is why we came up with our first system, which was a ceiling mounted system, which then brought us to the problem of, well, that means that you have to bring the patient to the system. Why don't you make your system mobile so that we can bring it to the patient? And so we love to listen to our customers, because they know the market, they know what their needs are. And so we did that, and we created our mobile device, which was the one you see on the screen here, was our original classic device that we used to design. And we took all of those components, and we tried to find a way to make them all mobile. And then finally, you can also see on the screen here, we have our wall mount device, which was a device that we came up with that would also be able to be mobile, but would take up less floor space in the room. And so that's how we got our start. And so I just wanted to show that, and I'll show a quick picture here of where we are today. And so if you could switch to the next slide there. As you can see, we now have expanded into even more options and more opportunities. And a lot of them came from that humble beginning, but these are the devices that we now have. You can see we have our one-way video mobile and our two-way video mobile that replaced the classic device and allows us to do all of the same things that we could do back then, but much, much more. And we now have a wall-mounted device that replaces our old wall-mounted device, but this one now has the ability to provide two-way video to the TV as well as provide all of the other options that we had previously. And then, of course, our ceiling devices, which replaced the camera installed by itself and the speaker. We've now replaced it with something that can be quickly installed in place of a 2x2 tile in a drop ceiling type of an environment, and it powered with PoE Plus. And we also have a drywall for a hard pan ceiling that we could install that one very quickly as well with a single hole in the ceiling that we fish the PoE Plus cable through. And so that just gives a quick background on the history of our company. Wendy, do you have anything to add?
If I can right now, do you want me to talk about the great features of the audio and video and why they're so important to have that privacy?
Yes, please.
From the clinical perspective, you have to have the ability to give patients their privacy when needed, and AvaSure can do that. But the bonus part about this is that there is the audio component, right? So you can still listen in to the patient's room if you need to when the privacy is enabled. And this is so beneficial because we've had actually some adverse events avoided because of that. And for example, when you put the patient in privacy, video privacy, we do teach the monitor staff to check in every now and then just by clicking into the room to listen. And one time that there was a patient who was becoming very escalated and actually yelling and screaming at the nurse. And so the nice thing was the monitor staff could then chime in to ask if they were okay, but also alerted security. So in my mind, those two options, the audio and video, are a necessity. But that's when you put the patient video in privacy. And lately, what I've been hearing is the option now that you can also put the audio in privacy. So you want to be able to keep the video on, but maybe a patient needs to have a conversation with a social worker and maybe somebody from the church, a clergy member. And we don't want them to not feel like they can actually communicate and have a deep conversation with that person. So by being able to put the patient in audio privacy and still maintain video is a great feature. And I think they're both needed. They both have to be existing when you're looking at patient care. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Wendy. Toby, I'm going to transition to the next section of the presentation. Laura, I don't know if you dropped the PowerPoint on purpose. I can't see the PowerPoint anymore, but we're going to transition into lessons learned. Toby, you made, you and Wendy make it sound like this is really easy, right? I just need some video, I just need some audio. Surely there's nothing that ever changes and that we have to adjust to. Can you share some of the lessons you learned across the years that we've been doing this?
Absolutely. That is kind of our goal, though. In all honesty, David, we have for years we've seen it that there are so many challenges already in the acute care environment, and there are so many things that our medical specialists need to deal with in the hospital, and so we don't want to add to that burden at all. And so our goal is to try to make this as simple as possible. And so we see it as kind of our goal to take the complex and make it simple, so that it's not one more burden on the workload for those in the hospital. And so a lot of that plays into the lessons learned that we've had over the years. So when we start to look through this, some of the lessons learned that we've experienced is that there is a lot of challenges around the cameras in the room. For instance, most cameras, off-the-shelf cameras, do not have a very long market life. If you were to buy a camera this year, next year, it may very well have moved on beyond the current market life, and you would have to buy a different model. As well as there are just a ton of combinations of different cameras out there that you can select from. You can choose webcams that are fixed, and you can choose security cameras that are high resolution, and you can have some that can pan, tilt, and zoom. And all of those things are challenges because you have to figure out what is the necessary level of quality that's required in order to provide the services that are needed to stop these adverse events in the acute care environment. And so that's something over the years we've done a lot of research on, and it's taken us a lot of years of trying to select the right camera, as well as we've established a lot of different relationships with the camera's providers to be able to maintain the camera life longer and to provide ways that we can provide the firmware control as well as the vulnerability controls, as opposed to those things. If you were to buy the cameras yourself, you would have to deal with all of those challenges yourself. So that's one of the things that we've really worked together with the different camera manufacturers out there to select the best camera for the application, as well as to provide ones that are very robust in the medical environment, being that they need to be able to be cleaned, and they need to be cleaned by not just caustic agents, but also UV. And so there's a lot of challenges around that. And if you were just to pick any old camera off the shelf, you very well may select one that cannot withstand those types of things. The other thing is that when you're using this in the room, you have the situation that part of the time it is dark in the room. And being a safety device, we want to make sure that you can see into the room, and not just see into the room, but be able to see very well in the dark. And so part of this is that you need to not only have a camera, but you also have to have the ability to have night vision. And so that is something that over the years, we actually started off with an off-the-shelf night vision system, but we discovered that it was not very reliable. And there were challenges around even just making it available and being able to get a hold of the components to be able to do this. And so over the years, we've actually developed our own night vision system to be able to provide a very high level of resolution and quality to our customers, so that they can be able to see in the dark very well and be able to still stop falls and other adverse events, even though the lights are off in the room. And so all of those are really things that play into just the selection of the camera, which is only one of many things that we've had to learn over the years. And as we continue down this list and we talk about the audio quality in the room, some of the challenges that we've found and have had to address are the fact that a lot of the patients in the room very loudly. Some of them are on the weaker side, and their voices reflect that. And so we have had to find ways to make our microphones be such that they are able to pick up the patients that are very quiet as well, and to be able to provide that audio quality back to the observers at a very high level of quality. As well as we have the challenge that they may or may not be able to hear well. And so we need to be able to provide varying levels of audio quality in the room, as well as be able to set off a stat alarm and be able to alert someone down the hall. And so it ends up with a very large range of issues that you need to be able to resolve in relation to the audio quality. As you look at that, you also have the problem that speaker and the microphones actually can couple into each other and can impact each other. So you also have to be careful about that. And we call that echo. And so we need to be able to provide that echo cancellation. And so we put quite a bit of work into digital signal processing over the years, and we have even more projects coming to provide additional noise cancellation in the room to be able to filter out things such as the TV in the room and other items like that. So all of that is just kind of another example of some lessons learned. When we moved beyond that, we started to look at the fact that we started out with an off-the-shelf security software that provided the video. And we discovered very quickly that the reliability of this was much too low for a system that needs to run 24/7, 365, that needs to be able to provide patient safety. And so over the years, we've actually developed systems, our own software, that will provide that higher level of quality, and we're able to customize it for the needs of our customers in the hospitals, as opposed to trying to use something off the shelf that really does not work perfectly for the application. As well as we've heard our customers tell us about how important it is for us to minimize, if not completely eliminate, downtimes, because of once the system is in place, these hospitals are absolutely reliant on us, and we want to make sure that we can provide them a very high level of uptime, so that even though they may have to do patch updates every month, that we want to be able to provide ways that they can do those things without downtime. And then just getting a little bit into certifications. So a lot of people don't realize that if you buy off-the-shelf components and you put them together and make your own device, you actually have to get that certified. You can't just take each of those separate things that might have their own certifications, but in order for them to pass the OSHA requirements, they actually have to be tested separately to be able to confirm that they meet ETL and other fire requirements. They need to actually meet some UL requirements. And so in order to do that, there is a very large compliance effort that we go through with our products, and over the years have gotten better and better at, in order to be able to get our systems to be very optimally compliant, if you will. And the idea there is that we have worked together with ETL and UL, FCC and CE, and we work on making sure that we have all of the compliance in place for all of our devices, so that we can make sure that we keep not only the patients safe, but we also want to make sure that the people using the equipment are safe as well. And then finally, I do want to share a little bit about vulnerabilities. So as we all know, there are a lot of bad players in this world, and so they want to cause trouble for all of us that are trying to do good in the world. And unfortunately, that's just a fact of life. And this is something that we spend a significant amount of time on, addressing vulnerabilities, potential weaknesses that could be an issue with the system, because that changes day by day. There's always new hacks that come out. And so it's a continuous effort that we have to spend time on, making sure that the system stays secure. And as our customer that has either an AvaNet agreement or a subscription, we're providing those updates to our customers to be able to be sure that they are staying safe and secure. And that is something that if you were to do it yourself, that would be a huge challenge, because of all of the different pieces would all have separate compliance aspects that would have to be tested for, and you would have to work together with different suppliers. And we do all of that on our end in order to make sure that this is as simple and straightforward as possible for our customers. Wendy, do you want to share a little? Sorry, David, do you have something to say?
Yeah, hey, Toby, I mean, that's a lot to chew on. It speaks to what we're doing for our over 1,000 customers to ensure them that every day their experience is, uninterrupted. We're providing them the safety of the information that's there. Wendy, I'll turn it over to you in just a second, though I do want to turn to the polling question, because I think this is an interesting point to poll the audience to just see that, during COVID, what was your experience? Did you experiment? Did you try different things? Did you, look to different options for your virtual care? So, Laura, if we could pull up our first polling question. Everyone, just please take a second to note one of the following. During COVID, did your facility implement any do-it-yourself solution to try and provide virtual monitoring or care? Please select one.
I'm interested to see this, because I think there was, from what I'm hearing and from different customers too, that there was a lot of kind of do-it-yourself solutions during the pandemic.
Wendy, I don't think you can see the results as they're coming in. One is overwhelmingly the case, and only just now did someone vote for a second option. So this is interesting.
Okay. So overwhelmingly, yes, they implemented it during, okay.
We'll see, here we go. Yes, and we're still using them, and yes, but we abandoned using it.
Mhm.
So during COVID, everyone was trying something. Wendy, do you have any comments on these results?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think during COVID, we had to do something, anything that we could do, right, to decrease the nurses' stay in the room, decrease the need to, use the PPE, donning and doffing as much as possible. Also to help reassure the patients themselves or the family members who couldn't be there. Any camera was doable, but it really was just that. It was just a camera to probably keep eyes on the patient. And I think that's an important thing to note, that that's not the same as virtual patient care. So keeping eyes on a patient is one thing. Letting me see into that room is one thing, but that's not really helping me now as my workflows increase, as I have less staff to work with. I need something that's actually going to help with virtual patient care. So I can see that. And kind of back to what Toby was saying about the features of some of the things in the camera, a lot of us can zoom in, and depending on whatever they put in the room, probably could zoom in on the patient, but could it pan? I feel like that is huge. If you can't pan, patients don't sit still. I mean, maybe during COVID that was different, right? But they don't sit still, they're up and moving. And to keep a patient safe and ultimately a staff member safe, I want who's ever behind that camera able to pan that room and follow that patient and keep that patient safe. And if you can't do that, that's not going to help me as the nurse, because what's going to happen is whoever's behind the camera can't see the patient, is guess what they're doing? They're calling me. I'm having to go into the room now. That's not helping my workflows, my processes. It's not a way to go. So that's one of the great things about the panning, that you should really have that in a camera. And I know Toby had mentioned something about the communication and the sound, and that is so important too, because what I've heard from those customers that did put cameras in the room during COVID, they could hear in the room, they made that work, but they couldn't communicate. And so if you can't communicate with the patient, again, how is that helping your bedside staff? The person behind that camera needs to be able to communicate, one, to maybe redirect them, two, to determine what they need. If they need a glass of water, they're probably going to call the nursing assistant, right? They're not going to call the nurse. But maybe their pain's back and they would like to talk to their nurse. Well, then they'll call the nurse. But if you don't have that two-way communication, again, you're not helping your bedside staff at all, because all you're doing is calling the nurse to go into that room, to check on that patient, to do their redirecting, to figure out what they need. So just going back to the things that we've learned, it is so important to have and there's so many things I could speak to about this, but the two that kind of stuck out with me was the panning and the two-way communication. They're a must. And we've heard that from customers too, that the two-way communication is definitely needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many things that I just couldn't get into, because the language features and things like that.
Absolutely.
There's so many lessons learned that we've had over the last 15 years that we've been doing this. I mean, it's just been a huge product growth of us being able to meet the customer's needs with all of the things that we've had to add to the product in order to really address the market. So absolutely, those points.
Yeah, and I think now those devices or those cameras that were put in for COVID, if they don't actually help and are part of the patient care process, and it's more like Big Brother, and they're not doing what they need to be doing, and you don't have the buy-in. Back then, there's buy-in was there because it was keeping the nurses out of the room, keeping their exposure down. But now when you're looking at it for patient safety, there's so many other things that you need to consider when putting a device for patient care in the room.
Cool. Toby, I wanted to ask, I saw the next slide. We're still talking about lessons learned. I didn't know if you wanted to summarize this, but then let's transition to those thinking like, hey, there's different elements where we want to see if we can do this ourselves. Can we then transition the conversation that way? So Laura, if you could bring up the next slide.
She knows that we can't see. Okay.
Laura, can you bring up the previous slide? Because I think we had a nice summary of what, Toby, you outlined. That's what I was thinking. There we go.
Yeah, so just in summary, there are so many aspects to things we've learned over the last, like I said, 15 years that we've been doing this, that have been just a huge learning experience for us. And if you were to try to do it yourself, as you said, you would get to go through all of those adventures yourself that we've gone through, and those are all memories and scars, but they've all been things that we've been able to learn. And so I would just really point out that if this was something that you were thinking that you were going to try yourself, I would definitely say you're going to need a lot of staff, because it requires a lot of maintenance to be able to maintain these types of products. So make sure you plan for that, as well as keep in mind the compliance situations, as there's a lot of issues around that you need to make sure that you're addressing, so that you can maintain your legality as well as your patient safety. Cleanability is another thing to watch out for. That is, it's very hard to develop products that are cleanable and in a hospital environment due to the challenges around that. And then, of course, the robustness. You just got to make sure that as you're designing, that you're taking into account the fact that there is no downtime, that this is always up, and that you need to be able to maintain that. So just make sure that you're taking those things into account if you're going to try to do it yourself, or you just use our system, because we've already taken care of those things. But those are things that I would definitely mention. And this is another good point that I often don't think about, take for granted, if you will. But our this is the manufacturing process that we use to do this is a lean process, and so we are able to maintain a very high quality as well. And what you see in this picture here is actually a very complicated final production tester that we use to test every aspect of these products before they ship out the door. And so we do test everything, all aspects of it, the pan, tilt, zoom, the audio quality, the lights, the networking, the wireless. I haven't even talked about any of the networking challenges, but all of those things need to be addressed as well. And then, of course, you have the problem of scale. If you only needed one or two of the devices, okay, maybe you could do it. But when you have to maintain 50, 100 of these devices and going on up, you're going to run into challenges around the fact that this is a significant effort to maintain these devices from a compliance perspective, as well as from a cybersecurity perspective. And maintenance and repairs also are a challenge around them.
Got it.
Do you
Thanks.
Wendy or Dave?
I was going to add, just again, kind of back to the nursing part of this, is now that for those that are not using the devices, or that they're still using them, but maybe they're not seeing the utilization from the devices, or maybe the buy-in, maybe you need to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out what is the goal now. The goal at the time was COVID, right? But maybe what's your goal now? Is it to impact your staffing crisis that you're currently seeing, or maybe retain the labor, again, to improve patient and staff satisfaction, reduce one-to-one sitters, whatever it may be? Revisit that goal so that you can improve that quality of care. But that quality of care shouldn't compromise or increase the nurse's workflow. So get the nurses involved. Obviously, maybe during COVID, it wasn't that, we weren't doing that, we just were putting them in. But now, if you want to look for a successful program for virtual care, you need to get the nurses involved. Look for the nurses. I always think of the high functioning ones, the ones that are willing to change, or that will help promote change. And maybe even consider identifying people at your hospital to be your virtual care champion. These are all the things that I know my team works with the customers on all the time, helping them develop their program and helping them bring in the people that really need to be involved so that they can have a successful program moving forward. So just because things worked for the short term in COVID and you're not seeing them work now, just revisit the reasons why, and think about what you can do to help the nursing staff on the front line. Because if it's IT involved, you better have a nurse at the table, especially if it's involving patient care. So I just wanted to point that out. Things change a little bit now with COVID.
Hey, Wendy, I'm going to ask you to continue on that thread, right? I spoke with Toby the other day, and he mentioned, we actually, as a company, we tried to just offer the hardware and software, right? It was something that we were asked to do, and this is kind of in the same theme of should you try this yourself? Because you might think, well, it's a lot what Toby provided an overview on, but then there's the clinical element here. Right? There's the workflow, there's the people, there's the process, there's the trust building, there's the usage that goes into this. I once heard the quote that was, 10% is technology, 90% is about the people and process. Can you talk to that?
Oh, for sure. I bet you every single nurse that's on this webinar right now has said these words. They obviously didn't ask a nurse, because it happens all the time. If technology is amazing, but if it's going to involve patient care, it's going to involve the frontline staff, your nurses, your worker bees, and you have to have them involved in this. So one of the things that, get them involved early, get their awareness going, let them help build and provide or build your workflows. If they can help with their workflows for this new technology, it'll be more efficient, trust me, than anybody else trying to do it. And again, that buy-in is so important. But what I think what they learned early on was you need a policy, you need processes, you need workflows, you need best practices, job descriptions. That is a lot, because this is not just a camera in a room. That's an IV pump. An IV pump is in a room. But this is a program. This is more than that. So you have to really make sure you have everything. And that's something that I think that's what, Toby was mentioning, that we have that now, because they realized they needed the nurse in the room too to help with the entire program.
And actually, if I can add to that too, that first 5 years, we weren't incredibly successful. And it was during those 5 years, those first from 2008 to 2013, where we were mainly selling technology. We were selling just the technology into the hospitals. And it didn't really take off as a solution until we recognized the fact that it's a system. It's a system that needs not just the hardware and the software, but we need the clinical educators to be there to help, create the cultural adaptation. This is a completely different way of doing things from the traditional way things were done with one-to-one sitters. We needed to have project managers that could be involved and working together with the hospital's project managers to be able to deploy this effectively. We had to have our deployment teams and our customer care support teams to be able to provide all the aspects that are needed in order to make this successful. And people just don't realize how critically important, as you said, the people are, that we have to have, not just the technology, but we have to have all of that knowledge of how to implement a system like this effectively and how to be able to get adoption. So absolutely, I think that is critical, and I appreciate you for bringing that up. And I'll tell you, I've been visiting a lot of hospitals, and almost always when I ask them, what are some of the things that you like about our system, without fail, almost every time I hear, well, we just loved your clinical educators, they're amazing, And so, it absolutely plays into just all aspects of, like you said, it can't just be the amazing technology that we do have. It is amazing. But it is the whole system.
Thank you both. I thought, and before I cover this slide, though many of you may have already read it, a lot of this is what we're talking about. Laura, I wanted to ask you to pull up that next polling question, just to get a read from our for our attendees. And this has to do with the dynamic between IT and the clinical teams. Do you currently have a committee task force that brings together IT and clinical team members working on virtual care? So please take a moment to select one of the following: yes, no, or unsure.
I'll be interested to see this too, because this is a big things that we really encourage, to have that steering committee early on, not just with the nurses, really bringing in different champions at every level, from executive leadership to clerical staff to nurses to clinicians, especially when it comes to virtual care.
Not to mention, this is a big part of our culture here as well, is that we are all tied very closely together between engineering and our clinical team to be able to really understand the needs that we need to provide for our customer. And so this is something that I would say is absolutely critical for our customers as well.
Excellent.
Wendy, you want to talk to that? Are you surprised?
Well, I'm excited about that, actually. I'm really happy to see that. That's huge. You need this. You need it from all levels, especially, if you think about just a standalone site, that's fine, but then you start expanding throughout your system, or even to, maybe even different use cases. It's good to have that virtual care steering committee or telehealth steering committee, whatever you want to call it, but having those champions on there, I'm thrilled to see that. And the more they start doing, the more customers that do this, the better. They really will have a better buy-in, a better just outcomes overall.
Super. So I'm just going to touch lightly on this slide, then I'll pull it back to you, Toby, and to Wendy, right? This really is an illustration of what we've achieved over time. Toby mentioned early on, we were working on a lot of the technological things, and in the meantime realized the value of clinicians as well as our implementation team. I think about 15% of our staff at AvaSure, they're professional nurses, and so understand the workflows, understand the environment, understand how to make the solution work. And so what we found is you really have to cover these 4 bases. Number 1 is clear definition on your goals, really understanding the workflows during the implementation phase, but not just setting up the goals, managing through the change, managing through the project and the different elements of all the things Toby mentioned, all the things that Wendy mentioned that really drives the change management process. Again, it's 10% technology, it's 90% people. You've got to build trust along the way, and then various technical considerations, because there's all these elements of, does something need to be portable or ceiling mounted or TV mounted? What types of patients? What kind of technology do you need to support the different patient types? And then finally, really making sure that all those things align to quantify, to articulate, hospitals a business, and these things have, the project success has to be measured in terms of outcomes and financial impact and so on and so forth. Again, I mentioned this at the top of the webinar. We're proud that over 150 of our own customers, right, have documented, and the latest poster presentation, again, 25% fall reduction, 90% reduction in actual sitter time, returning bedside care workers to the bedside. So we're proud of that, and we know that this is absolutely critical path. You can't miss any of these steps, and the clinical team and the IT teams need to be working together, and we just saw that in the polling slides. So we're glad everyone responded to that. And Wendy, if Wendy's excited, then we're all excited. So any other thoughts from both of you as it relates to achieving ROI and building trust? I've got my Juliet story if all else fails, but Wendy, how about you first?
I do. I really, we hear the word scalability a lot, and I always think that's an IT word, and I don't, but I mean scalability. So think about, if you're looking to do virtual care, whether you're going to try to do it yourself or you're looking for a partner to partner with, the scalability is, can you maybe start within your hospital, but then what if you need to expand to the different care units? And then can that partner do that? Can that partner help you expand to throughout your system? Can that partner, and this is big for me as a nurse, be part of integration? Can what you're looking to do be integrated in the EHR, right? I lived in the EHR as a nurse. Make sure that the nurses aren't doing more work. Don't make them do outside other processes or workflows. Make sure whatever you're looking to do, it can be integrated into the EHR. And then finally, the same thing goes for the call light. We know there are so many alarms out there for nurses. And, you know, again, if you have a good patient safety virtual care device, it's going to have an alarm to it. But could that alarm be integrated with the call system? So think about that, because that's the scalability I think of for nursing. Like, can we already work within your current infrastructure, and then can we work with your future infrastructure? So think about that when you're looking for a good patient care device or virtual care device. That's my final words.
Thank you. Toby, over to you.
You know, there's so much to talk about, and I would just love to, you know, continue to talk all about the things we've learned over the years. But I think the most important thing to really take away from this is really reliability. The system is critical for patient safety, and it has to be reliable. It's not something that you can rely on, something that's running 80% of the time, 85%, 90% of the time. It's something that's got to be up, and it's got to be up all the time, and it's got to be something that your staff and your teams can rely on, and that your patients can rely on. And so as you're trying to figure out what the right solution is, keep that in mind, that it's critical to be able to have that high level of reliability. And, you know, I just also want to point out the fact that it's critical to have a team that really knows both the technical and the clinical aspect to make sure that you can address all of the needs that are going to be needed in order to maintain a system like this.
Got it. Thank you both. I'll summarize this last part because we talk about ROI and building trust. For those online, if you go to avasure.com and you hit our insights area, look under the finance topic, and you will find very specific things related to our ROI achievements, documented clinical success, and so forth. In terms of the other point here, which is around building trust, we had a webinar and we had a chance to talk to Juliet Aninye. The VA has accomplished incredible things using our technology. In fact, they freed up 55 FTE as they deployed the utilization of our system, and Juliet won a national award down in Washington, DC, and what she credited it to was working together, both the people, process, and technologies, and said that she had a number of nurses that at first were unsure of the technology, but once they saw another person on the side, they saw that they were duplicating the care factor for their patients. The light bulb went off, and it was a light bulb moment for them, and so then that's how they achieved the trust, and that system is taking off. So you know, we provide that partnership and that leadership, and that goes to the previous slide that was up there. I'm going to give it just a second for Q&A. Laura, we've got one more slide, I think, talking about what's coming down the road. Upcoming webinars. Might be taking a second to refresh. So on Thursday, we have one of our webinars coming up on the topic of virtual nursing. We also have a virtual symposium, which will be on July 20th. These things you can find on our avasure.com website. Laura, I'm still seeing the program excellence positive outcomes slide. So if anybody wants a visual, mine's not refreshing for some reason. Perhaps you all are seeing it.
I can see the upcoming events slide there.
Oh,
that's helpful to you.
I'm not seeing it, but Toby, you want to read the 4 topics?
I would love to. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. So yes, we have coming up this Thursday, we have the Keeping Pediatric Patients Safe with Virtual Sitting, and that's at 12 p.m. Central Time. And then on June 22nd, we'll be having session 4, introducing the expert oversight telenurse model. And then on Thursday, June 29th, we will be having our CHS customer story, and that's at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then we're also going to have our AvaSure Digital Summit in July, on Thursday, July 20th. Did you want to share a little bit about what the Digital Summit's going to be, David?
Yes, our Digital Summit. We did this in the fall last year. We have our customers, our users, talking about best practices, how they're bringing clinicians and ITs together, what kind of results they're getting, especially what we're seeing with virtual nursing. Virtual nursing is an area where there's many different use cases. to improve retention, as well as to make improvements in the admissions and discharge processes. And so that's what we're revolutionizing these days. Where we were the pioneer in virtual sitting, we're now working with many leading organizations. We've got innovation contracts and agreements with folks that we're piloting different use cases and learning from. And so we share that because we're all going along that journey at the same time. So for more information, again, you can put also comments in the follow-up survey if you have specific questions there. I do have one question before we close out, which is, you talked a lot about the role of the clinician. How do you suggest getting clinicians involved if IT is already leading the process of purchasing or assessing virtual care? Leave that as an open mic question.
I would first, again, my biggest thing is never do something if that's involving patient care without asking the nurse, because it's going to affect the nurse. So get them involved now then. If you just get them involved, let them give their input, let them be a part of the processes, the workflows, whatever needs to be developed from this. Just get them involved. They have to be, otherwise they're not going to buy it. They won't have buy-in. Nurses need to understand why they're doing something, and then they need to understand, how this will help them. And that's really what has to happen.
What role would you recommend, Wendy, that they talk to?
Like I said, I would start, again, you got your executive team, you've got your nurse, like maybe a couple managers, definitely your nurses on the front line, maybe some charge nurses, maybe some nurses that float from a couple different units, because maybe I floated ER to critical care. What works in ER doesn't work in critical care, and vice versa. So maybe a nurse or two that floats around that could help give some good input. Don't forget the nursing assistants. Sometimes, then they're going to be affected too. So really, if you've got a steering committee, make sure that everyone somehow is involved from some level, because it's all affecting patient care. And those are your frontline nurses and your frontline staff, not just nurses. PT, OT, anything like that. Just doesn't have to be everyone, obviously, just a few of them that are, highly motivated, are okay with change, can drive change. Those are ones that would be good to be on the committee.
And I think too, it makes sense when you approach them to approach them with really a seeking knowledge on, what are the use cases, what are the needs that they have for it, and how can the technology address that? Is really some of the things that I think are critical to really be able to, have success in that endeavor as you work together, technical and clinical together.
Absolutely.
Great. I think we're going to close it out here. There was a question in terms of, if you're recommending getting started with DIY after COVID, what would you recommend, to jumpstart the process over again? I don't know if anyone's got any opinions on that or other closing thoughts, but for each of you, we can close out there.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, I'll be honest. It's pretty complicated. If you were going to get started with it, I think I would start around really understanding, like I said, the use cases for it, and trying to really understand all of the requirements that are going to be needed for it. Really try to architect and define out all of the different pieces that you're going to need ahead of time, as there's a lot to it. I mean, there's so much to it. The other thing is that make sure you set aside a lot of time for it. It is a complicated task. And so, if you're thinking you can do it on the side from what you're already doing, I'll warn you, you can't. I mean, it is a complicated system. We do make it look easy, but there is a lot to it. And especially maintaining a high reliability system. It's not just the servers, it's so much. It's the devices, the servers, the clients. You got to be able to maintain the traffic as well. There's a lot. So make sure you set aside an appropriate amount of time for yourself and your staff to be able to really have that the time to do a quality job of really architecting the system.
And I'd add, Toby, and go back and listen to this webinar very carefully, right?
That too.
Any other advice for folks that want to start over? They've tried something, they've used something, Any lessons learned?
I'm biased, but I'd say come and see us. I mean, that's the best option. But if you're not going to do that, then I would really recommend that you you really take a close look at the way that you would go about doing this, the amount of expense that you make sure you budget an appropriate amount of time to be able to develop it. Make sure you include cross-discipline people across the board. I mean, that's critical to it. And good luck.
Wendy, last thoughts?
I think just whatever technology, do it yourself, reasons that you're going to implement something. If it's, again, surrounds patient care, it's going to affect the nurses. And so make sure that it basically augments their practice and allows them to work smarter and more effectively, I guess, would be a huge one. Don't make them work harder.
I would add one last thought, and I'll look to you both to see if you would agree. I think I've seen a lot of IT organizations trying different hardware solutions because they eventually want to get to a camera in every room. And I think, we approach it from the other way, which is where do you get your ROI? Where do you get your patient fall reduction? Where do you get your nurse retention from? And eventually you've got to get to a place where, if you have some form of mixed technology, well, then work with somebody who can work that through with you as this technology space evolves. I know that we're moving further and further in that direction where we want to be part of that. If it has to be a mixed technology, consider that as an important element. Agreed?
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Find a partner that can grow with you.
Super.
And I would say there's challenges around that. I mean, when you do a device in every room, there is a lot of different use cases. And as you look at our series of room devices that we offer, they all are for different use cases, different acuity of patients and different ways that you're going to use the system. Rarely can you find a single solution that will solve everybody's problems. You'll either have some that are too expensive or some that are not high enough quality, or there's just so many variables to it. So make sure you're sizing your solution to the right use cases, and make sure that when you look at it, we're looking at it as in the future there will be an opportunity for one video system in the room, and we would really love to be that system. And so we're working towards a situation where we can provide that video towards other systems as well. And so that's something to keep in mind, is that there's a lot of different use cases for the video in the room, and so just keep that in mind as well while you're doing it.
Super. Well, we've got 2 minutes left here on the hour. I want to make sure we give attendees a moment. As you exit the webinar, please give us your feedback, score us, give us questions, fill out the survey. We want to continually improve these sessions. Wendy, thank you so much. Toby, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time, and we hope that this topic, as well as those coming up, are highly informative to you all. Thanks, and have a great day.